Now, United States Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has urged African leaders to promote good governance and tackle the corruption and crime that she says are holding back economic progress. Clinton was speaking Wednesday in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, at the opening of a trade forum of about 40 African nations that have preferential access to the U.S. market. She also stressed that business and trade in Africa cannot grow without governments improving democracy.
Progress depends on good governance and adherence to the rule of law. That is critical to creating positive, predictable investment climates and inclusive economic growth.
Clinton also offered an optimistic assessment of economic growth on the continent.
The ingredients are all here for an extraordinary explosion of growth, prosperity, and progress. This is the storyline of opportunity that I want to tell, because I know how important it is to translate legislation like AGOA, the efforts of governments like Kenya's, into daily changes that people can look to.
Now, Washington grants a duty-free access to more than 6,000 product lines from sub-Saharan Africa under the U.S. African Growth and Opportunity Act of 2000, or AGOA.
Clinton's visit to Kenya is the first stop of seven-nation African tour that will be her longest overseas trip since taking office. It is designed to show that Africa is a priority in the foreign policy of the Obama administration. Clinton's visit has been hailed by some as timely and a sign that the Obama administration has Africa on its priority list. Speaking in Washington recently, the executive director of the World Food Program, Josette Giran, applauded the U.S. for its efforts to help millions of Africans who are faced with food shortages.
So we think the Secretary Clinton's trip to Africa and her focus on food security is well placed. We think Africa is ready to lead on this issue. The African Union, through the CAADP strategy and through NEPAD, have really put in a plan of action that calls, for example, for every nation in Africa to invest 10% of its budget into agriculture and food security. And when nations do, the 6 or 7 nations that have done so are beating the hunger curve. So I very much applaud her focus. I think it's the right focus at the right time. But also it's a problem with a solution. This is the key thing to remember about hunger, is when the political will is present, nations defeat hunger.
Now, education is an important issue for Secretary Clinton and the Obama administration. In Kenya, free primary school education is now universal. However, there are few public schools in Nairobi's teeming slums, leaving thousands of children squeezed out of the formal education system. Kathy Maitani reports for VOA from Nairobi.
It is lunchtime at St. Christine's Community Center. And this midday meal may be the only meal these children eat this day. They come from Kibera slum, one of the largest in Africa, where the average family survives on less than $1 a day. Susan Munuhe is Assistant Director of Education in the Ministry of Education. She describes the situation in another Nairobi slum, Mathare.
The public primary schools near Mathare slum, there are about 3. And they can only cater for a maximum of 2,000 children. And yet, Mathare slum alone has about over 300,000 school-age going children.
To fill in this gap, a number of non-formal schools such as St. Christine's have sprung up in Nairobi slums. These schools teach the formal national curriculum, but largely operate without trained teachers and inadequate resources. Officials say most teachers in non-formal schools have not received teacher training and are not members of the National Teacher Service Commission. Charles Ochieng Ochiel is director and founder of St. Christine's Community Center.
If we can get teachers from TUC, or we can be able to pay those teachers who are from college, then quality will be there.
Education activists say there is almost no follow-up by the Ministry of Education of the quality of teaching and other aspects of education in informal schools. Don Bonyo is programs manager with Daraja Civic Initiatives Forum, an educational group.
We've not seen the schemes of work being inspected. We've not seen the lessons they make, lesson notes, being inspected. We've not seen examination records being inspected.
Most non-formal schools also lack the necessary amount of books and other school supplies. Ministry of Education official Susan Munuhe says only about 200 non-formal schools across the country receive funds for the purchase of instructional materials under the government's free primary education program. Education activists say there are at least 1,600 informal schools in Kenya. Diana Etieno Tuju is a volunteer pre-primary teacher at St. Christine's Community Center. She says the government had only supplied books to students once within the past few years.
All of them were given, but it was only once. Yeah, so right now they don't have books, they have to buy them. Some parents have a problem in buying even the books. Yeah. So at times the teachers have to sacrifice and buy the kids some books.
She says many students are sleepy or otherwise unable to concentrate in class because there is not enough food to eat at home. Education activists argue that the presence of non-formal schools sets up a two-tiered system, where those children living outside of slums get a better quality education. But government spokesman Alfred Mutua says every child in Kenya has access to the same education. Mutua says the government is trying to discourage informal schools. He says the government has never turned away a child from a public school, and there are plans to build more schools. Kathy Maitini for VOA News, Nairobi.